Challenge, and inform groups to realize the positive results while fostering individual growth. We are so thrilled to have him here to share with us information on tolerance is not enough. So again, please join me in welcoming Andre.
It's so strange to hear the words you wrote about yourself played back, right? It's like, so I am excited to be here. I'm glad to be at Mayo Clinic. I think that it is a very special place, and I think the work that you do is what makes it special. And so I'm not here to do anything but enhance what you already have been doing so well in working with our clients. Because I believe that we all can get better. And so I spent a lot of time as a middle school teacher. So anything you can throw at me, I've probably already dealt with. All right? So people say, well, how can you, do presentations? Well, when you've been in a classroom with hormones for extended periods of time, you learn how to develop some skills. So My last, before I joined the Mayo Clinic, I was a professor at Bethel University, and I taught in the School of Education, and I taught a class that was designed to reduce the achievement gap. So we spent a lot of time talking about diversity and inclusion and how we do that in classroom settings. And shortly before that, I was an affirmative action officer for Anoka County, and so looking at how Anoka County, which is one of the there are 89 counties in Minnesota, and there are probably about 7 of them that are very diverse, and Anoka County was not counted among those. So it posed some very interesting challenges in terms of how do we talk about, introduce, and engage in diversity in places where it's not so much so-called diverse, right? So I've learned some skills, and we'd like to just pass on some of the learnings to you. So we only have a short amount of time to get through a lot of material, so let's just get to it. Does everyone have something to write with? A pen, pencil, crayon, eyeliner, whatever? Okay, good. So what I'd like to do is just start off with a quick game. And the game is very simple. It's a coverall bingo. And I'd like for you to work with your colleagues to do a coverall bingo based on the items that are on the front of your handout. All right? So there are 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 6. 4 times 4 is 16. So there's 16 items. So I think we should have roughly about 6 minutes to do our coverall bingo. So you have 6 minutes to do your coverall bingo starting now. Bingo, do I win? It's a coverall bingo. Yes, and you lose. Everyone wins. You win, everyone wins.
I should just ask you these questions because you probably know them.
I have some knowledge. Yes. I do have a game with the
Really? Find a Swedish individual that can tell me. You have any grandmother Hispanic. There we go.
Yeah, that was true.
Thank you very much.
1 minute, 1 minute.
Change your name to make it easier for people. I did. Oh yeah, I don't even know.
4, 3, 2, 1. Game over. Game over.
Have everybody go ahead and take your seats.
It's a good warm-up than I thought it would be. So as you were going around the room, were there some things that were pretty easy to find people to sign on? So what was something that was easy? Earrings, all right. Earrings was one. Working with people from a different background was an easy one to find, all right. Were there other things that were difficult to find? Or you didn't find anybody, or you have questions about yourself? What's that? Eating glass. Please raise your hand if you have ever eaten glass. Most of us should have raised our hands, all right? So what is glass?
I don't know. Ice cream.
It is ice cream.
Wow.
It is ice cream. How many people have eaten ice cream? So how many people are Scandinavian by heritage, or anybody Swedish? You should have known this. This is glass is Swedish, is for ice cream. And tack means what in Swedish? Thank you, right? So that was a clue right there. That was a clue.
That's an unfair question.
What's that? Yeah, we have lots of trick questions in this. Anything else people have questions about that they saw as they were? Yes.
What's aabula?
What's its aabula? Abuela. Abuela, a grandmother in Spanish. Actually might have an extra A. Let me double check that. I think it does have an extra A. So it was supposed to, yeah, so it was a trick question. Any other ones that folks had questions? Yes. Yep, it knows the purpose of Eid. Yes.
Isn't it the one day during Ramadan that Muslims are not allowed to fast? It's the day of breaking fast?
Yes, it's the breaking fast. And usually it is a celebration. Right? Are folks familiar with Yom Kippur? Yep. What is Yom Kippur?
Holiest Jewish day.
It's the holiest Jewish day, but specifically the day of atonement. So if you have disagreements with folks, this is the day that you make sure that you get it right. If you don't get it right some other time, right? So there's that. Let me see what else. Any other questions people had about this? All right. So why, obviously, when we start, we're talking about tolerance is not enough. At the top of all of our slides are is a link. So if you have your phones out and you want to ask a question, feel free to do it there. You can do it in the room too, but if you have a question, you can ask it there and I'll address it. But why would we start with an activity like this, talking about tolerance is not enough?
We've got a lot to learn.
So not only do we have a lot to learn, what else is true? We have a lot in common, right? So there are a lot of things that we do know, and there's a lot of stuff we need to learn, right? And so we have to recognize that oftentimes when we talk about tolerance, that actually might not be enough. So what I'd like you to do now is, we'll do this just in a couple of minutes, but with an elbow partner on either or both sides, what I'd like for you to do is to talk about your name and give your neighbor either the meaning of your name or a story about your name, all right? And we'll take about 2 minutes to do that, a minute apiece. So share your name, or a story about your name, or what your name means with an elbow partner, and we'll start that time now. Four, three, two, one. Did everyone get a chance to share in your small group with your elbow partner? Did both persons or all three of you get to share? All right, wonderful, wonderful. As you were having a conversation about the story about someone's name or the meaning of their name, was there anything for you personally that you could relate to their story? Or was there something in common that you could relate to that's important to recognize about that person? Okay, yes.
Our middle names tended to be handed down. Maybe they were our parents' middle names or something.
So middle names happen to be kind of handed down, maybe family names or that kind of stuff. How many people have your name, any part of your name is related to your lineage or family relations? All right, cool. How many of you, your parents saw the name either in popular media, in literature, or just thought that was a really cool name and just named you that? All right, cool. How did other people, what were some other stories of people about how they got their names? Oh, no, I'll ask another question. How many people were named after someone who was significant in the life of your parents or your family? All right, cool. So now I'll ask the second question. So how did other people get their names?
Religion.
From religion. All right. Oh, that's a great one. Anyone get their name from religious tradition or something like that? Okay, so you're not alone on that. Cool, cool, cool. Other ways that people got their names.
It was popular at the time.
So maybe it was popular at the time, right? And so they said, you know what? Everybody else is naming their daughter Stephanie or Jennifer. Let's do the same. Right? One thing I have found is very interesting is that my daughter was born here at Mayo, and her name is Kennedy. And what I didn't recognize is that I guess it's okay for people to spell it differently. And so we spelled our daughter Kennedy like the president, and we have run into other people who have used, right here in Rochester, have used different spellings of that same name, which I particularly find interesting, but they have the right to do, right? And so I think there's a need for uniqueness about names and the importance of names. So why do you think I asked questions about where our names came from? Again, going back to this teaching tolerance. I mean, this idea of tolerance is not enough. What do our names say about us?
That we're connected.
That we're connected, okay. What else could our names say about us?
Also unique.
That they're also unique, right? There was something someone breathed up here.
That you couldn't argue what your name will be. You just got what you got.
So you can't argue what your name will be. In some cases, you just get what you get, and you don't have a fit, apparently. That's the thing, right? But in other cases, people have gone ahead and changed their names, right? Or augmented their names to fit their personality or their lifestyle or how they see themselves or how they want to be presented in the world. And so to recognize that, we have to have a level of tolerance, so to speak. But is that enough in terms of interacting with our clients, our customers, our patients, and with each other? So the agenda, very simply, is to understand conscious and unconscious bias, and we'll go through that very, very quickly. Identify how our biases can impact the way we interact with people, and learn ways to move beyond tolerance. Learn ways to move beyond tolerance. So what does tolerance mean? First of all, has anyone ever heard that used? Tolerance. So what is tolerance?
I mean, I guess it's this means that you're okay with somebody for whoever they are, but you don't necessarily like celebrate who they are or embrace it or whatever. But you're okay with them there.
Yeah. So we're okay with people, but we don't necessarily celebrate them, right? What else does tolerance mean?
Acceptance.
Acceptance. All right. Acceptance.
I think of it as appeasing a person, but not actually inviting them.
Okay, so appeasing a person, but not actually inviting them. All right. Cool. So I love my brother-in-law. Love him. I love my brother-in-law. Love my sister. She made the choice that was good for her. Right. I wouldn't have married him, but she did. And they and sometimes they come to visit, and I am so I'm glad that they come to visit, and in some ways I tolerate them. And why am I able to kind of tolerate them? He's not a bad guy. I'm just saying, I wouldn't have married him. Why am I able to tolerate him?
Because his wife is your sister.
Because his wife is my sister, and what else? I know when they're leaving, right? So I can put up with this because I know that they will be gone. And I wonder about that word tolerance. What's also tucked into that is that I can put up with this until I don't have to, right? And I wonder if our world is, if the complexities are going to become more simplistic, or are we going to expand in our complexity? But we'll tease that out a little bit. All right. So we just did the hello, my name is. We talked about that. So why are we having some of this conversation? Some of this conversation is because of our one of the assessments that we did back in 2015, I think it was the climate assessment. And one of the things that came out of the climate assessment was this idea that bias, that we have implicit bias or unconscious bias, and so we can address that. And that part of that unconscious bias is that people would say that I am tolerating folks, and we'll explain that and see how we can do better than that, right? So we are the best in the world at what we do, and we can be better. And so diversity inclusion, we're recognized by patients and employers and institutions and communities as leading in diversity and inclusion. These are the ODI kind of 6 goals. You don't have to know that, but just know that we're operating with goals in mind. One is to provide culturally competent care. The next is to attract diverse patients, to create a culture of inclusion, increase staff learning about diversity, to develop diversity leaders, and to promote and lead in health equity. So those are kind of the 6 overarching goals that Mayo is undertaking, and we are a part of that. All right. So you don't need to know about the diversity leadership and all that kind of stuff. I do want to talk a little bit about how we define diversity. And has anyone seen this movie Anchorman? This is probably the only piece I can show in public without embarrassing myself or whatnot. But he has a convoluted way of thinking about diversity. And so they asked the question, well, what is diversity? And Ron starts out, he says, diversity is an old wooden ship. And we know that is not the correct answer, right? So diversity is not an old wooden ship. But what is diversity? Diversity really is all the ways in which we are alike, in which we're different. And so when you think about diversity, that's what I want you to think about. Not how we're the things that separate us, but the things that make us more alike and different, because both of those simultaneously are important to recognize. If you don't notice that I'm an African American or a Black man, you are missing out, right? You're missing out on being able to relate to me, to see the world from my perspective. And all too often we'll say that we need to be colorblind. Has anyone ever heard that we need to be colorblind? And I would say that it was a great attempt to talk about our common humanity, but what that misses is the fact that there are some ways in which the world approaches each and every one of us differently, right? So, and let me clarify something. So, I was not born Black. I know some of you are like, is it a reverse Michael Jackson thing going on? What's going on, right? No, I wasn't born Black. But in 1970, we used to do some, and many of you have studied this and know this much better than I do, but we used to do some pretty barbaric things in the 70s, right? So when I was born, the doctor handed me to the nurse, and the doctor turned me upside down and he slapped me. And how do you think I responded to that? I slapped him back. Like, you don't do that to people, right? No, that's actually an old Richard Pryor joke, and the only one I can tell. Right? So, and then the doctor handed me to the nurse, and she had some responsibilities. So she took my weight and my measurements and all that kind of stuff. And then she got to the part of her duties that changed my life forever. And it was the category of race. And so she looked at my parents, and she looked at me, and she looked at her checklist, and on her checklist there were 3 boxes: Black, white, and other. And so she's looking at, and this is in Dayton, Ohio in the 1970s, right? And so she's looking at my parents, and she looks at me, and she looks at her checklist, she looks back at me, and she looks at my parents, and she looks at her checklist, and she makes a decision. And what decision do you think she makes? Black. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? But the real question is, what was I before she made her distinction?
Baby.
I was a baby. I was born human, but because I was born in the United States, I was Black or African American or Negro, right? Had I been born someplace else, I'd have a different designation. If I was born in Haiti, if I was born in Belize, if I was born in Australia, if I was born in South Africa, I have a different designation. And we'll talk a little bit about that, why that is later. But this idea that diversity is our commonalities and our differences, and sometimes we can see differences as obstacle illusions. Obstacle illusions. artificial barriers to authentic human relationships. All right. So let's open up your handout and go to page 2 at the top. There's a picture of Dave. And what I'd like you to do is to write down some things that might be said about Dave. And what are some things that might be thought about Dave? So I'll give you just a couple of minutes to do that.
Now, these are things that I would say about Dave, or just things you think you'd be judged by?
Yep, so things that could be said about Dave, whether you would say them or someone else might say them. What are some impressions that folks might have about Dave? Things that either might be said about Dave or thought about Dave. What are some things that might be said about Dave or thought about Dave? Either by you or by other people. Cool. What I'd like you to do is just talk with another elbow partner. So if you've already spoken with the first one, move to someone else that could be in front of you, behind you, and just take a couple of minutes and talk about what are some impressions about Dave. 4, 3, 2, 1, and so I just want you to notice I'm trying to use some new technology to display the text on the screen as I'm speaking. So so we're working on trying to clear that up, but that's a part of Google, what Google does now. So they will do transcripts, live transcripts, so that everyone can communicate and participate at their level, right? In a way that they can. So so you'll see me look back at that from time to time just to see how accurate the transcript is. But as you were sitting there talking about Dave, what were some things that came up about Dave that people would either say or think about Dave?
Yeah, he's a motorcycle.
That he rides a motorcycle, right? And that for some folks that means something, right? What's that?
He's a biker dude.
He's a biker dude. So that might mean something for folks, right? What else might be said about Dave? He's got tattoos, right? What was that? That Dave wants a hug. He's like, hug me, right? What else? So he wants a hug. That he's got tattoos. What did the tattoos mean? That he appreciates the art of tattoos.
He works in a tattoo parlor. He's wearing a shirt.
Okay.
He's a white male.
So,
I don't know what the patches mean. Does he have that?
Could be a vet. It could be a vet, right? Motorcycle dude, white male, works in a tattoo parlor. Anything else?
He could be daring
He could be daring.
due to his t-shirt.
Yeah, so he's living on the edge, right? And if you're driving a motorcycle in Rochester, you are living on the edge, right? So there's that. All right, so cool. Let's go down to the next item on that handout, and you'll see that there's an image there on the right-hand side of the page. What I'd like for you to do is to count the number of triangles in that image, and when you have a number, shout it out. Shout out the number of triangles.
0.
So 8. I hear 8.
5.
I heard 5.
0.
I heard
11.
0. I heard 11. 1. All right, cool. So let's back up for a second, and then I didn't hear anything. Like some people were just like, I'm not saying anything, right? So we have that. So we had 8, 11, none. So let's define a triangle. What is a triangle?
3 angles.
So it's 3 sides that complete a closed, right? So now what I'd like for you to do is to go back and look at that triangle and see how many 3-sided closed objects are there. How many triangles? There are no triangles there. There are 3 Pac-Mans, but no triangles, right? So 3 sides. Yep. So this is called Gestalt psychology. Gestalt is the act of closing shapes. So we automatically close shapes, which means that we automatically have biases, right? So we make up stories, we create things that don't necessarily exist. So there are no triangles there, but because of the way our mind works, we create those triangles in that space, right? So bias is a bias or prejudice is a means of strong inclination of the mind that is preconceived opinion about something or someone. A bias may be favorable or unfavorable. Bias is in favor of or against an idea. Prejudice implies a performed judgment, even more unreasoning, right? So this idea that bias can be favorable or unfavorable. So we all have a bias. We just have to be conscious of what that bias is and how we use it or how it gets used by us, right? So we'll talk about the tolerance scale in just a second. There are some truths about human beings that we have to recognize, and many of you act in these ways almost automatically, right? The first is the understanding that human beings can learn, change, and grow. You'll see that right at the bottom of your page 2. That human beings can learn, change, and grow, which means that if there's a set of behaviors today, they don't have to necessarily exhibit those same behaviors the next day, particularly if learning is happening. So we can learn, change, and grow. We also have to recognize that learning, changing, and growing doesn't happen on our time frame. It happens on the individual's time frame. Anybody had a behavior that your parents wished you would stop doing, right? When did you stop doing it? Basically on your time frame. They may have tried to encourage you to do that. For me, it was dragging my feet. I would walk with scooting feet. And the interesting thing now is, as an adult, I don't appreciate that when young people do it themselves, right? I'm like, stop doing that, because I had to stop doing it, right? So that's important to recognize. Next is that people do what they think works, even when what? People act out in a particular way, even when it's not effective, but why? It's habit, it's what they know, it's what they believe. And in most cases, it's because it's been successful in the past. That something about that behavior has been successful. So when you meet someone who's violating our patient conduct policy. It is not because they want to violate the policy, but they actually think that that works, right? So for some folks, yelling, they do that because it has worked for them in the past. What do we have to introduce them to when what they've been doing previously is something that has become habitual for them? We have to introduce to them this idea that context is important, that having the same behaviors everywhere you go may not benefit you. So yelling may benefit you at home, but yelling is not going to get you very far in this particular hospital context, right? So so that's important. Next is that all human behaviors are goal-directed, and that attitude is a response to goal achievement. What have people been taught about an attitude? What is an attitude? How many people have attitudes right now? He said, I have an attitude, right? What is an attitude?
It's like a psychological disposition towards a thing.
Okay, so it's a psychological disposition towards a thing. It's a driving force. You guys are so intelligent. Like, that is so cool, right? My parents would have said that attitude is something that that you well, they weren't as articulate as you all are. They would say, learn how to act, is what they would say. Learn how to act, your attitude, right? And so my parents would try to do attitude adjustments. And I don't know if your parents did it, but my dad would get so frustrated and he'd say, you know, I don't like your attitude, boy, fix your face. And so I would fix my face. I spent a lot of time in my room, right? My dad was also a pastor. And so on Sunday, we would go to church from 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. We'd stop at 3 o'clock for chicken, not because we're black, but because chicken is delicious. Right? And so Friday night, I asked my dad for the car. And what does my dad say? I asked my dad for the car.
No.
Right? He doesn't say no. He says yes because he loves me, right? So he gives me the keys. I get in the car. I pick up my friends. We go cruising for girls. I don't know what would have happened had we found girls, but I fill the car up. I come home before curfew. I give my dad the keys, and he says I have what kind of an attitude? A good attitude, a positive attitude. And what do I say about my dad's attitude? It's also a good attitude, right? So we're cool Friday night. Sunday, my best friend Dexter calls me at noon and says, Andre, can you pick me up for the movies? What do I know about Sunday? All day church, but I'm 17. I'm invincible. And Jesus is my friend too, right? So I go to my dad and I say, Dad, can I borrow the car? And what does my dad say? No. Not only does he say no, but he gives me the ultimate sermon, which is the hell sermon, right? And in my household, the worst consequence you could have was going to hell. And either you could go to hell on your own or my dad would show you the way. Right? As a result of that interaction, what would my dad say about my attitude? That it was a negative or a bad attitude. So what actually determines an attitude? Your goal accomplishment. So when people are not able to accomplish their goal, they have a bad attitude. But when they accomplish their goals, they have a good attitude. Just think about a teenager in your life, right? When they get what they want, they almost purr. When they don't get what they want, you know, you can smell them from a mile away with that bad attitude, right? So those are important things to recognize. So all human behavior is goal-directed. And what are the goals of human behavior? We're all looking for significance, we're looking for belonging, and we're looking for safety. Significance says that I'm a person with purpose and power, that I can do something. I was not an accident, that I was born on purpose for a reason, and that I can contribute something. Belonging suggests that I want to be in relationships with people who understand my purpose, who understand my significance, right? And I would suggest that, or I'll submit to you that belonging occurs even, and oftentimes the people you've selected to be in your life may know your purpose more so than the people you were born to, right? So the people that we bring into our lives, we bring them in because they help us belong. And then lastly, we want to be physically, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually safe to be in relationships with people who understand our purpose. All right. So those are important things as we talk about this tolerance scale. So there are five areas of the tolerance scale that I want to talk about, and then get you into an activity, and then we'll come back together. One is this idea of repulsion, which is the lowest point on the tolerance scale, and these individuals are the repulsion lens is one where we see individuals that are different from you in ways that are not normal. So we are repulsed by those people that are not normal, right? So that's the repulsion lens. And the avoidance lens is we see individuals as different from us, and they make you uncomfortable. So their differences make me uncomfortable. Tolerance is these individuals are different from you in ways that make you feel somewhat uncomfortable, but you can manage that. You can manage that. And why can you manage that? Because you have a forebrain. You can manage that because you know it's short-lived, right? I can get through this. And then acceptance is that these individuals are different from you, but the differences don't matter. You pay most attention to the similarities and disregard the differences. You listen to them as patients and as colleagues, but believe that if we treat everyone the same, everything would be fine. And then 5 is appreciation. When you meet someone, you see their differences as positives, right? You see them as contributing members. So what I'd like for you to do, I've kind of gone through those 5. What I'd like to do is break you into small groups. And I've been thinking about how to do this. So I think from here on, what is your name? I'm sorry. Elizabeth to the pillar. And what is your name, sir? Pundi. Pundi? And from Pundi front, you are group 1. So if you look at your handout and circle the number 1, so you will be the repulsion group. From here, what is your name, man? Yes. Angela. So from Angela on to the pillar, you will be 2, group 2. So circle 2. Since you're in the middle right here, and I want to stop at your, what is your name? Amberly. Amberly. So I'm going to stop from Amberly to right over here, and we can go all the way back. You will be tolerance, which is number 3. And what is your name? Brenda. So from Brenda forward, you will be 4, group 4, and that is acceptance. And in the last quadrant, you will be number 5, all right, which is appreciation. So what I want you to do is I want you to go through the questions and give about 3 minutes to kind of go through those questions. And I want you to use the lens of the number that I gave you. So this isn't how you see things. This is how that an individual using the lens of acceptance or repulsion would view an individual. All right. So I'll give about 3 minutes to go through those questions in your small group, so you can turn around or work in smaller cells. But 3 minutes to work through that. All right.
I think it's kind of hard. I've never encountered anybody in my life, you know, that were also thought behavior towards the person. No, I'm just saying, I don't know anybody else. I've never met people like freaking people out and working like 6 weeks. I feel like I've never.
Let's meet it up.
I'm not saying, well, I was just saying, you might forward it far into the hole. I read this one.
They make a mistake, they don't try to I was so that person doesn't really take his point of view. Well, that's good.
That's that. My name is words cannot describe.
Because I misread the question. I thought I was supposed to describe a person. Oh. Not what would it be. It was sauce. How would I make that person look like?
Sorry.
This is a very blood town. I've seen cars stop in the middle of the road with no stop sign. I've seen it. No, I'm just saying, it's like, I just get on the sidewalk. No stop sign. Middle of the But I mean, I think the thing that, the realistic application of this piece to me is that even though you don't see a lot of these things, let's say, just say it's 100, make up a number. Now, you might encounter more than 100 people a day. Therefore, you might see somebody every day. But, behavior,
4, 3, 2, 1, and so let's just. So I have 2 homework assignments for you. One of which is, I'd encourage you to think about each one of those categories, the 5 categories that we talked about, in terms of these things, right? So let's start with repulsion. So if you see that person in the hallway, or that person makes a mistake, or they had a success, how do you interact with that person?
Throw a milkshake on them.
You throw a milkshake at them, right? Okay, that's pretty aggressive. You might not be at Mayo very long, but So in terms of repulsion, if a person has a success, what do you contribute that success to?
You're angry about it.
You're angry about it. Like, how could they come up with that idea, right? In terms of, let me make sure, because I don't want to get them in the right order. So in terms of avoidance, if a person had a success, you what? You not acknowledge it, right? If someone else may say the same idea and you go, oh yeah, Jim, that was a good idea. When Sarah said it, we didn't say anything, but now that Jim is repeating what Sarah said, look, that's a good idea. With tolerance, that person had a success.
Congratulate them if it's easy. So
if it's easy to congratulate them, or if it's just I might sign the card or whatever and say, good job, period, right? In terms of acceptance, what would acceptance say if a person had a success? Oh, you go out of your way to congratulate them, right? And in appreciation, if a person had a success, you go and beyond, above and beyond. You might get cupcakes, right? You might tell the whole division, put it in the newsletter, that kind of stuff, right? So let's jump from here, and I think you can make the logical conclusion in terms of the probability of success. So if a person is treated with repulsion, what's their probability of success on a scale of 0 to 100?
You said less than 10% with the thickest skin.
Yeah, with a thick skin, less than 10%, right? What about acceptance? I mean, what about avoidance? What percentage? 10, 15, right? Slightly better than those folks. And you didn't account for having a thick skin or not, right? In terms of tolerance, 25%, all right? Acceptance, 80%, pretty good, right? What about appreciation? 100%, right? So is tolerance enough? We said it was 25%. If your car worked 25% of the time, what are you doing with that car? If it's working 50% of the time, what are you doing with that car? It's out of there, right? So when we talk about this idea of tolerance, we want to remind ourselves that we have to go above and beyond, because tolerance is not enough, particularly if we're getting 25%. And I would assume that would be with thick skin, right? So how we relate to each other is extremely important. So if you turn to the next page, page 6, there are some ways in which we interact with each other that are important for us to talk about. I didn't want to give away my punchline. And so one thing that we should be asking ourselves is switching from what's wrong with people to finding out what happened to them, right? All too often, particularly our patients, have things that have happened to them that have changed how they interact with the world. And so once we're able to understand more about that, then we can interact with them better, and we can be cognitive, right? We're Homo sapiens sapiens, the ones who know that they exist. And so that becomes important. So on page 7 is a cognitive homework assignment. This is the second homework assignment that I'm giving you, which is to put pluses and minuses in each of these categories. So the groups on the left tried to give you information about those groups across the top. And if it was positive information, put a plus. If it was negative information, put a minus. If it was never anything you talked about, put a 0. And as you go through that experience, I want you to think about how you think, or how you may have come up with some of the biases that you may have, and then decide, what do you want to do about that, right? So, and on the back on page 8 are some things that you can do to uncover some of your biases. What we know is that Dave is a doctor. He's a graduate of Columbia Medical School. He manages a health co-op for restaurants and restaurant workers. He started a Fresh Start program to remove unwanted tattoos for low or free cost, right? So how people see me may not in fact be what I am. The fact that we see triangles when there are none speaks more about us than it does about those triangles. And so what I would suggest is that recognize where you are on that continuum of the tolerance scale and decide if you're being able to be effective in this organization given where you think you are. My name is Andre Koen. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day. So the great thing is that we're family members. We're all part of the Mayo family. So my office is always available. If you have further questions or want to explore things more, let me know. This is a lifetime of work that we spent about 45 minutes on. So thank you so much. Enjoy. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Let's get on there.
Okay.